This week on the Sunday Glide, I'm going to be sharing with you the advice that I'd give to my 12-year-old self with respect to longboard design and exactly what will help to skyrocket your surfing and avoiding equipment that will stifle your progress. And if you are new here, my name is Considine and I'm a longboard enthusiast, a competitor on the 2023 World Longboard Tour and a coach. And I'm here to share my learnings and experiences like this one today with you all. So if you do find the video valuable, then please feel free to subscribe. And if you know of anyone else who might find it useful, then feel free to share it with them. And for ways to support the channel, check out the links down below and check out some of the Glide Surf Collective products. Let's get straight into it. So when it comes to surfing progression, there's two key stages that I wanted to delve into today because I find that at these two different stages, this is where our surfing equipment makes a significant impact on the way that we're actually able to progress. The first stage that I wanted to categorize today is surfers that are at the beginner phase all the way through to starting the advanced phases of their longboarding. Now, from beginner to advanced, this covers a large portion of surfers' development, from their first wave all the way through to completing some decent turns, though they may not be very critical, having mastered balanced cross-stepping and even having become confident with the Hang 5 and Hang 10. The second category is the surfers who are at the start of the advanced stages all the way through to the competitive or expert level. Here, it's a little less about the fundamentals and more about building up the critical nature to our surfing. At both stages, there are board designs which can hold our surfing back, which is exactly what I wanted to unravel in today's video. So the first thing that I'd tell my 12-year-old self in this stage is that you don't necessarily need to be riding what the pros or your favorite surfers are riding. And this is one of the biggest myths that I wanted to dispel. These boards are often designed for a very high-level surfer, and it's attractive and often pulls people into potentially buying the wrong board for their level when they see how the pros are carving these epic turns and getting these insanely critical nose rides. Although a little bit counterintuitive at first, the boards that allow us to ride in this sort of style aren't actually what's most conducive to learning. And so in understanding that, I then want to break down the style of board that, in my opinion, is going to be the best for the beginner to advanced surfer, this being surfers who are either learning or becoming proficient with the fundamentals of surfing, as well as cross-stepping, nose riding, and turns. What we're really looking for as we're learning all of these things is a board that is really stable and really reliable and that can surf in a variety of conditions, meaning really good waves as well as really bad waves. This is crucial because repetition and practice in these stages of our surfing development, as we're learning these skills, is what's really needed to see effective development. If we have a board that's only working in some conditions, then we may reduce our practice time significantly, which can stilt our progress. So what does this type of board look like? So as we're starting out here, I think without a doubt the most important thing is to start with a board with the wide point in the center. So just like this board here with the wide point in the center, I think this is a fantastic start. Now, because of the position of the wide point being in the center, what we can actually see is that the outline of the rail is quite straight, which means that we actually carry oftentimes more width through the nose than we would otherwise see in another board with the wide point back. Now, because of the width up through the front part of the board, when we actually step up the board, we're actually going to be able to maintain speed and also keep a lot of balance. And with the width here in the surface area of the board too, as we actually step into nose riding in fatter or shouldery sections, which is often where we're starting as we're learning to cross step and nose ride, this will actually allow us to do it rather than having to be in that critical tight pocket. So the benefits to having a board follow this is we're going to be able to surf it in really sloppy conditions. The reason we came up with this particular design, some of you may have heard me say before, after my first year on tour, we were surfing Galicia in Spain, Long Beach in New York, and the waves for beach breaks, really mushy and just really difficult to surf. I had a very flat outline and template to the boards I was riding, which made surfing these conditions really tricky for me at this stage. So I wanted something that would just be easy to surf in all conditions, so I could reliably compete at my best. Placing the wide point in the middle really enabled me to nose ride much more successfully, as it enables us to make use of the shoulder of the wave for hang fives rather than having to be super critical, and it also helped for the turning element because the board doesn't have a big hip, it's easier to pivot around. So what this means for you guys with having a board with a wide point in the center is it's going to be really easy and balanced for your cross stepping and nose riding first of all, and it's actually going to allow you to build up your repetitions in doing this because you can complete it in less perfect and more mushy kind of shouldery sections, which is really good, as well as in a variety of conditions, the good and the bad. And finally, it's also going to be really good for allowing you to complete pivot turns. The next thing I would suggest to myself in this stage is keep the rocker through the board fairly high. More rocker slows the board down, which in and of itself can make surfing more manageable in these stages. But more importantly, a more highly rockered board makes it so much easier to disengage the rail when turning. One of the biggest problems that we see for people early stages in their surfing and when they're learning to turn is catching or bogging a rail, which simply means that there's just too much rail engaged for either the turn that you're trying to complete or the part of the wave that you're in for the turn. As we increase the rocker, because of the banana shape in the board, more rail will leave the water more easily. The other benefit is the nose ride safety. As the board has more rocker at the front, instead of the board acting like a spear and driving into the water, it has more lift, which acts to push water away and stop us from nose diving to some capacity. In addition, maintaining a wider nose and tail also helps for general stability at the front and back ends of the board. So as you're starting out and all the way through to learning how to cross step, hang 5, hang 10 and get some nice little turns happening too, sticking with a board that has the wide point in the middle, has a pretty significant rocker and keeps its width all the way from the nose through to the tail is going to be a really good idea. For surfers who are at the upper end of this stage and are potentially looking to get a little bit more out of their turns, then having a little bit of a sharp rail at the back third of the board can be really, really useful, as well as potentially narrowing out that tail a little bit can be a good idea as well, but there's just some food for thought. Now, once we've gotten really comfortable with nose riding in the way of hanging 5 and hanging 10, as well as completing some nice pivot turns, we need to start thinking about boards that will take us to the next level. So similar to the prior example, where we can end up riding equipment that's too narrow and it's really hard to learn the fundamentals on this equipment, which is where a lot of surfers get stuck. Surfers in this stage can actually get caught with boards that are too supportive and prevent them from moving on to the next stage, as there are limitations in these boards that can hold us back. These limitations are that boards with the wide point in the middle are not as conducive to carving maneuvers, and they also don't surf as well in the pocket from a turning and nose riding perspective, especially with wider noses unable to lock in tight to the critical pockets for our hang 5s and hang 10s. These boards also allow us to surf on the shoulder without providing as much of a challenge to stay critical. And one of the key elements that moves surfers through the advanced stages of their surfing is the critical nature of their surfing. So being able to perform big carving turns in the critical part of the wave and get really tight in the pocket nose rides, which creates a lot of lift underneath the nose. So how are we going to get there? The board designs that really lend themselves to this critical surfing are boards with a wide point at the back, around the back third of the board, and typically boards with less rocker and a flatter outline. Now, it's worth noting what moving the wide point back on the board actually accomplishes for our surfing and the performance of the board itself. Firstly, as we move the wide point back, we'll have a narrow nose with respect to our tail, which decreases the swing weight of our board, meaning that the heavier component of the board will be at the tail, which will make the rotation of our turns much easier as there's less weight at the front to get around. On top of this, with a narrow nose, it'll make it less likely that we're going to catch the outside rail of the nose when we're completing a turn. So essentially, the board will be more responsive and easier to turn, where we can be more confident we're not going to catch an outside rail in critical sections. Additionally, with the wide point back on the board, it'll actually roll from rail to rail with more speed, which can be really conducive for our carving maneuvers, which is definitely something that we're looking to really get on top of in this stage to progress our surfing. What I find to be one of the key benefits for more advanced surfers nose riding is the narrow nose is able to fit closer and tight into the pocket when we're nose riding. And with the wide point back, it's really conducive to creating some fantastic lift in the nose when we're tight in the pocket. As we previously mentioned, these boards are meant to be surfed in the critical part of the wave, allowing surfers to really challenge themselves by pulling themselves into the pocket and maintaining speed and power. What can happen though, especially for surfers in the first stages that we spoke about, is these boards can be brought into their surfing and surfed on the shoulder, which really isn't what lends themselves to performing well. So with all of that being said, and with some of my recommendations there are a few little tweaks and changes that we can still make to our equipment to really hone it in and make sure it's the right for us and the waves that we're surfing. The first being potentially using something that has a longer rail, like a pintail. So I'll show you this one here. But this board, it is a pintail. I've got it recently, but what it really helps for is being able to carve with speed and also maintain its line and hold its drive on bigger, steeper, faster waves. Whereas something like a square tail sometimes can skip out if we're pushing too hard or if we have a wave that has quite a lot of speed and power. So something like this, which has the longer line down the tail, is going to be really handy. The other thing that you can do is opt for something that's a little bit flatter. A flatter board will go faster and will carry its speed better than a more banana shaped or heavily rocketed board. So that can be another alteration that we make. What I would say is that I almost always advocate for something with a little bit of tail kick, and this is really important for our nose riding, as we've spoken about. So just like this board here, you can see, although it's a pig shape or wide point back, but it does have a fair degree of tail kick, which I hope you can see there, which is really instrumental in making sure that it can nose ride really well, and that we're holding and locking ourselves into the pocket. And so that brings to one of the final points before we do get into the last part of this video, but it is a factor that we might actually need to have more than one board. So you might have your board that's a pintail that's going to ride really well and hold its line in bigger, faster conditions. You might then have your pig-shaped or your board that has the wide point back, and this is going to be really good for your critical transitional surfing, like at point breaks, where you can really jam it in the pocket and have that reliable critical nature to the wave. And then what we might also do is then have the beach break board, or something that we use with the wide point in the middle, which we know is going to be a little bit safer and really allow us to get some good maneuvers done in less than perfect subpar waves. So just a little bit of stuff to consider there for yourselves. So I hope that video was really handy. I know it's something that I would have liked to have heard when I was younger, and so hopefully you guys can take that for your own surfing, no matter where you're at, and help it to inform the equipment that you're going to be using to provide you the most success with your surfing. If you did want to support the channel at all, there'll be some links down below for some of the Glide Surf Collective product, as well as if you did want to make a donation to help support me on this year's 2023 World Longboard Tour and getting to all the different locations. But we'll leave it there for today, and we'll speak to you soon.